Hello, thank you for visiting us at the Interface Library Project, also referred to as Project Watson. The original webinar was held on February 10th, 2011. It was hosted by Mr. Stephen Palmer, the State eHealth Coordinator of Texas, and by myself, Alicia Adamson. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Relations and Initiative at Open Health Tools. So before we get started talking about a library for interfaces, let's just take a second to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. So this is the basic anatomy of an interface, and I'm going to stick to real basic here. We're going to talk about having there's a data source, an EHR, a lab system, and a data destination, possibly an HIE or another EHR. At any rate, there's a desire to move information from the data source to the data destination. And how do we do that? Well, there's some kind of a bridge, a mechanism. We can talk about interface engines. We can talk about transformation engines. What that thing is that allows data to move from the source to the destination. You'll note there are touch points. There are touch points where that specific tool touches the data source and touches the destination. And it's at those touch points that we have to develop interfaces, some way for the transformation engine or the interface engine to know what it's getting, what it needs to do to it, and where it needs to go, and how to get it to where it needs to go. So at a very, very high level, what we're talking about are these two touch points, the interfaces. So Stephen Palmer, eHealth Coordinator, he approaches me and he says, Alicia, you know, we're doing all this HIE stuff, and we're going to have to start building lots of interfaces, lots of expensive custom interfaces to do HIE. And he asked me, do you know of any open source organizations that might be interested in helping us create a library to house these interfaces so that we can maybe save some money, so that we can reuse, we can share? And I said, yeah, I do. I think I know just the place. And so I suggested Open Health Tools. So let's talk a second about Open Health Tools. We are a 501c6 trade association. We have a vision of improving the world's health and well-being by unleashing health IT innovation. And we think we can best do that by supporting and providing resources for open source projects. We have about 100 members at Open Health Tools, and we're growing between 3 to 6 members per quarter. There seems to be a lot of interest in hosting having open source projects hosted. We have world-class leadership at Open Health Tools. Dr. Rob Kolodner, as many of you may recognize him as having been the National Coordinator for Health IT just prior to Dr. Blumenthal. He is our Chief Health Informatics Officer. When Rob retired from federal service a couple of years ago, he was approached by Skip and Brian, and through that discussion, Dr. Kolodner discovered that the vision and the mission and the goals of Open Health Tools really aligned with his personal conviction for transforming healthcare and using technology to enable that transformation. So we're really, really excited and just pleased that to have Rob as part of our leadership team. Now, Open Health Tools was founded by Skip McGoy and Dr. Brian Berry. Some of you who are very involved with the open source community may recognize them as having been founders of the Eclipse Foundation. The experience of Skip and Dr. Berry in building this open source community is applied toward the work that we're doing here in healthcare. We have world-class membership, the nationals or the government organizations that are members of Open Health Tools. We have Canada InfoWay, Canada, the National Cancer Institute in the United States, National Health Service of the UK, National eHealth Transition Authority of Australia, the Veterans Health Administration in the United States, and Indian Health Services of the United States. We have a number of academic institutions that are formal members of Open Health Tools. We have academic institutions that participate in some of our projects without necessarily being formal members, but this is a list of the academic members that we have. And again, you'll see that we have Linköping University from Sweden, Mohawk College in Canada, Australian Health Research Center, Cardiff, We also have in the United States Georgia Tech, Oregon State, Florida International University. We're really, really happy to have those folks on board. On the corporate side of our membership, the private companies and public companies that are members of Open Health Tools, you'll see some names that you recognize, names like IBM, Oracle, Red Hat, Vanguard. We have some, also medium and small-sized businesses that are members of Open Health Tools, and we think that this is a really good mix for innovation. So what are we all doing exactly? Well, we have a number of charter projects, and here's a list of the current charter projects, as you can find on the Open Health Tools website. Our academic outreach program, where we engage students from community colleges all the way to PhD candidates and say, hey, let's work on some open source healthcare stuff and see what we can come up with. And there's actually a challenge. There's a competition, and it's pretty cool stuff. Again, please go to our website and check it out. Projects around HL7 tooling, conformance, privacy, access, and security services. You may be familiar with the Model-Driven Health Tools project. We've received a good amount of press around that lately. Health information interoperability, SNOMED, supply chain, IHE profiles, the Canadian EHR project, Open Exchange, the application integration platform implementation project, and of course the interface library project. In addition, we have the shared artifact repository. So these are all the projects that are in the charter for Open Health Tools. There are other projects that are resourced through Open Health Tools, but we call those Forge projects. There are fewer restrictions on being a Forge project and being a charter project, but you can learn all about that by going to our website at openhealthtools.org. I encourage you to do that. So that's Open Health Tools, and we support open source projects. But what do we mean when we say free open source software? What is that? That free word can be very confusing for folks. And Richard Stallman, who's a pretty famous software guy, he said, think of it as free as in free speech, not free as in free beer. And I remember as a student reading that and thinking, what does he mean by free beer? Because I have never had free beer ever in my life. And even if someone bought me a beer, somebody has to pay for it. And in some ways, that's the way free open source software works. When we say free, we don't mean gratis. It's gratis versus libre. It's the liberty of the software to be free to become something else. So I got the beer. I may not have had to pay for it myself, but somebody had to pay for it. And thank you for paying for it. And now that I have it, I can do what I want with it. You know, within the limits of the license of the beer, so to speak. I can create slug traps, and when I lived in Oregon, we did just that. You can make barbecue sauce with beer, bake bread, and you can even engage in a wonderful game of beer pong. You are free to do with the beer what you want, and that's what we mean when we say free. And so as it relates to the interface library, and what we're going to, the work that we're all about to engage in, the interfaces that we're going to be writing, amongst other things. But for the scope of this project, we're really focusing on the interfaces in the state of Texas, which is my home, and where I am doing work with a number of hospitals here. We're going to build a bunch of interfaces. And I also am doing some work with folks in Georgia, and I have some friends in New York and Oregon and North Carolina. And when I build these interfaces, I want to be free to share them with them. If I'm working on an interface from system A to system B, and my friends in North Carolina say, hey, I got one of those, systems A's and systems B's, and I want to connect them, let me take that interface and see what I can do with it. And our friends in North Carolina take it, and they say, hey, you know what, this is going to get me about 60% of the way there. Why don't I just add some more code? Good, now I'm good. And so then North Carolina can contribute that code back to the library. And the idea is that we can all share. And we have the freedom to do that. At any rate, we hope that we can speed up the process of getting our work done. And together, we can contribute to the Watson Library. But it's not the job of a state agency or the job of a health information organization or health information service provider, whatever you are. It's not your job to manage an open source project. Well, that's what Open Health Tools does. And so Open Health Tools, we will provide resources and governance around the library, and starting in the United States and starting with some of the folks that were on the original call, we're going to start building this library. We're going to create mechanisms for participating, and then eventually our friends around the world will start to contribute. And that's fantastic, right? I call this my kumbaya slide. It's great, you know, things are working out, but there's a problem. So going back to my beer example, you know, there's a lot of freedom to do stuff with the beer, but there are laws and limits. You know, I can't go to my friend who is a distiller in Portland and bring vodka back to sell in my family's liquor store here in Texas. I just can't. There are laws that prohibit me from being able to do that. So while I might actually write some software, many of us have signed contracts with the vendors that say, no, we will not share any of our code with anybody else. We have licenses around the software that protect the intellectual property, and sometimes we can think of the intellectual property as being on the other axis of freedom. So part of what we would like to do with the Watson Library is go to the vendors and say, dear vendor, would you please allow us to share these interfaces? There are three main activities that we need to engage in to make Project Watson successful. We need permission from the vendors to let us share, to grant freedom. We need a mechanism for communicating and accepting code submissions from people who write the code. So it may be the vendor has an interface that they can contribute, but I have a lot of friends who work in hospitals, and they've got tons and tons of interfaces that if they were allowed to, they could contribute to the library, but only if they have permission from the vendor. So, the third component is going to be discovery and distribution for consumers of these interfaces. So once we have this library, we need to create a way for you to search that library and look for interfaces that are appropriate to you. We would like to have a real live human being that can help you with that. And eventually we'll have some automated searching technology that will help us with that. So we have two steering committees. One is the Executive Steering Committee, and at the time of the presentation, Mr. Stephen Palmer was the only member of the Executive Steering Committee as we were just getting started, and he is the chair. We have an Operational Steering Committee that is chaired by myself, Alicia Adamson. We also have membership from Hartford Healthcare, Vangent, HP, and NextJ Systems. Now, what we intend to do is start working with the Executive Steering Committee to create contract language that you, the states, can put into your RFPs that will say, vendor, when you respond to this proposal, please tell us that you are okay with putting the interfaces in the open source library. And that's a very high level of how we want to say it, but that's what we want to say in effect. Jenna Yost is the OHT Director of Operations. So now that you're ready to be a part of the Interface Library Project and learn more about Open Health Tools, please reach out to us. Jenna Yost, OHT Director of Operations. She's going to handle sort of the logistics and the communication stuff, but please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you want to talk about OHT in a broader context, about possibly even becoming a member. And if you need a little more one-on-one dialogue, please just reach out to us, and we're happy to give you a call. Again, please visit our website. Thank you very much.